This thing is supposed to be finished, but my orange moss just arrived in the post. Am I going back in? Hello there, I'm Greg and I'm making an eye lichen lamp inspired by Labyrinth. And I hope you like the sound of rain. Labyrinth is a 1986 musical fantasy film starring David Bowie and Jennifer Connelly. It was directed by Jim Henson and written by, among others, Terry Jones of Monty Python. It's great, it's funky, it's more fun than Dark Crystal. I highly recommend it. One of the wonderful designs that Brian Froud, the concept artist who actually designed a lot of the goblins and puppets before Terry Jones wrote the script, also father of Toby Froud, who is the baby in the movie. One of the things he designed was lichen with eyeballs on the end, which follows the character of Sarah around in the labyrinth. I saw some light up eyeballs online and I thought, let's do something from Labyrinth. I've got a list of things I might want to make tribute to. Doctor Who, Little Shop of Horrors, this has got me thinking about. And Labyrinth is one of them. So, eyeballs, Halloween, go. And we're off. There is a storm raging outside, so I hope you're an ASMR like the background sound of rain person. What are we making? Well, a plant pot. It's a plastic one, but I can make it look like terracotta. Wire coat hangers. No wire hangers. Yes, wire hangers. And this stuff I used in my Cantina Band instrument build. It's this 3-part nice bendy metal. Don't know what it is. Don't know what it is. Lots of glue sticks. Might bust out the black once the clear has been used up, because it is after all Halloween. A bag of Wilko rainbow coloured aquarium gravel. R.I.P. Wilko. Genuinely sad that Wilko's closing. I will miss them, and they're lovely sci-fi bag clips, but I'm going to do a mould of one so that I never have to run out ever again. And finally, some light up eyeballs and some moss. I don't know why I'm doing a mystery thing, because I've clearly just told you what this is in the intro. I did this on my Patreon. I said, can you guess what I'm making? And one of my patrons said, well, is it the eyeball moss from Labyrinth? Yeah. Yes, it is. Obsessively testing them all the time, switching them on and off. Every time I move the battery pack, I think I may have stripped the wires. But spoilers, I never did. So, if you knew about soldering and circuits and things, you could have the switch somewhere and the battery somewhere else, but I just want to make it with what I've got. So I'm making the battery door on the bottom of the plant pot so it can slide out. So you have to be careful not to glue the door on, not to cover the switch. So these batteries can be changed. I would imagine they don't last very long. But I did want it to be freestanding rather than have to plug it into a plug socket. So now I'm building a chamber around the battery pack so that the weight of the plant isn't sitting on top of that battery box. So I've got some wood and I'm cutting 2 beams to go either side of it, or are they studs? 2 studs to go either side and cut them at 45 degrees so they fit nicely into a circle. Then the gaps down either side I'm just filling with aquarium gravel to add a lot of weight. That's my hair. And then covering it all in hot glue so it's a nice big solid wodge of gravel so it doesn't fall over much. Then building a bridge across the top of this wooden casket with these Duplo, they're not Duplo, but they're that kind of plastic building block. Just bought a bag of them from a charity shop. And as they're hollow, they're another opportunity to fill, there's my hair again, they're another opportunity to get a lot of gravel in there. Nice. Neatly done. Yeah, so I realised the way you actually do this is put the block into the bag of gravel and use it as a scoop, and when you pull it out it will be full. But mess doesn't matter. So here I've cut one of the long blocks in half because I need to leave the back of the space empty so that the battery pack will still slide underneath. It makes sense. Would you believe it? It's already after lunch. Tuna mayo sandwich. So I wanted to get on with actually making the plant, but this is the structural part. So we have a nice heavy base, a nice space there so you can reach the switch. We're using another one of our beloved party ring coasters. I'm going to cut a little slot in it because I need to be able to get the wires through. Then that will be my base, and that's the disc to which we attach the roots of our spooky plant. Speaking of which, I've set the wire on the battery pack so that it will come up from the centre of the plant pot, and then rather than just have each one as an individual thing, I've sort of variegated them. It's a variegated eye lichen, or lichen. It's a variegated eye lichen, so there's two attached together there that will be kind of on their own little branch. One, a tall one, a little sort of clump of three, but with one a bit longer, just to create some variety. So now I'm going to lay them down and plan my trunk. This is 400% speed. I'm not this fast, but it's pretty rough. You just lay it down flat. Obviously, once it's standing up, you can bend the branches front and back as well. So this is kind of creating a two-dimensional spine. And there's our template, blueprint. Wear gloves if you've got them, particularly if you're squeezing pliers and bending wires. You don't want to hurt your hands. I'm just creating little bendy limbs with a small tab on the bottom that I'm then going to cable tie, I believe, to the trunk. This, I needed a Y-shaped, a bifurcated fork, and realised that this wire hanger already had one. So, if it ain't broke, if it isn't broken, then don't fix it. Cable ties. These will be covered with hot glue. Bing! When you snip those, they really fly. They go about 10 feet. And adding an extra bit of the thick bendy wire so it has 3 roots on which it can stand up on. And pull it taut with your teeth. Why wouldn't you? Here, just reinforcing all the connectors, because once it stands up I want to be able to bend and pose the branches, but where that wire is bent, if you bend it too many times, eventually it will snap. So I'm just giving it some muscle, and that's how it sits on its base, because I've curved the roots around into feet. Now, how do we get the eye designs off these fairy lights? Maybe nail polish remover works a treat. I think that was my wife's suggestion. So I've just left a faint trace of the eye that was already on there, because that's how I'm going to position my own iris. This is a brass washer, which I decided was about the right size of circle, a rather ineffective green permanent pen, and then a much more effective blue Sharpie. And then for a bit of variety, this one's a bit more dilated. This is either a curtain ring or a key ring. It's just a brass ring that I had. So there's a couple that are slightly larger. This is the initial eye detail, quite rough because I'm going to paint over it, but I just thought I'd better draw in some radial lines, some spokes, eye spokes, with my little green permanent marker. Clear enamel paints. I don't know when or why I bought these. You can tell they're very old because the blue one is really quite stringy and glucky, glupus. So this is mostly green, and I'm mixing in a couple of dabs of the clear blue as well. But both clear. I didn't want the iris to be opaque because obviously I want it to light up, so I just happen to have these two clear colours, and I'm mixing green and blue to make a nice teal. I think teal might be my favourite colour. So either greeny blue or greeny grey, like this wall. Pure fluke, bit of luck, this enamel paint dissolves and eats into that Sharpie line. So I was worried that the blue Sharpie was a bit too heavy, and it just so happens that this enamel paint dissolves it. So I'm now able to feather in that blue line into the centre of the iris area. And then, as it's still a bit bluer than I wanted, once it was dry, I did a layer of just the green. Okay, while they dry, let's texture the plant pot. Or this is texture attempt number 1. Doesn't really work. So PVA glue, a bit of burnt umber acrylic paint, and baking powder. Now, I've done this before. I've seen other people, like Bill, making stuff. Everyone uses baking powder as a texture thing, but when you put it in paint, it really froths up, and then the paint goes very runny. You get this brown, bubbling cauldron, and the paint goes really watery. So what I need is some fine sand. Baking soda and super glue is great for texture, but baking soda and paint I don't think I'm going to do again, because I get these claggy gobs, sort of lumpy nodes. It's just bad. So I'm going to retexture this. Now, main thing that stops that plastic plant pot from looking like it's made of clay is the very fine lip around the top. So I've got some of my Milliput, mix the hardener and the other parts for 7 minutes, roll it into a white worm, and then put it around the edge. These cheap gloves, I think they came with some cheap resin, but there's a difference between a glove and a hand-shaped bag. And these are some very cheap hand-shaped bags. like the ones you get with hair dye. I used to dye my hair all sorts of colours in my teenage years, and it really took me back to these really cheap, really noisy sort of sandwich bag gloves. Yeah, so the wetness, moisture, which is a better word, wetness or moisture, neither's great, is just making the yesterday's texture paint peel off, and I do not mind because it didn't work. Now the eyes are dry. This is the same permanent marker that I used on my Christmas ornaments, which the gloss lacquer I sprayed on made the black line melt. But I know that I'm going to use water-based crystal clear lacquer, it's called, to make these eyes shiny. So I'm thinking that this permanent marker will be fine to varnish over as long as I use a water-based and therefore a presumably less volatile, hostile lacquer over the top of it. So I'm just cleaning up that edge. Then I cut this little ginnel out of my party ring coaster for the wires to go in, sit the roots on there and make a mark where I want my connectors to be. Just going to hold it onto the wood with your friend and mine, cable ties. If you've got a thing that makes pilot holes, use it. Clunk, 3 satisfying clunks, and the job is done. Drill some holes. You don't need 2 holes either side, just put 1. Cable tie up through from underneath, over the root and back down through the same hole. And the cable tie's head, grommet, sprocket, sprommet, I'm going to call that the sprommet. So the square bit on top of a cable tie, the sprommet, will hold it through the hole. Bulking things out with foil, tin foil, bako foil, aluminium foil, aluminum foil, it's foil. As I'm going to use hot glue, I didn't want to just put it straight onto the wire roots. You need to bulk it out and cover it with something, and foil works fine. So we're starting on a bulking out journey. I'm currently on a bulking out journey because it's sugar season, isn't it? So any skull-shaped sweet is being consumed. Sugar makes me feel awful, but I'll never learn. So let's start by covering it in quite expensive brown tape. You can just see it costs £3.45 a roll. But yeah, I love brown tape. This texturing with a knotted piece of string is a great idea if you're making little trees for a diorama or an animation, or you want to make a knobbly magic wand, a wizard's wand, or indeed witches. This is a good idea, but for this it didn't quite bulk it out enough, so sadly I've now used up all my nice thick white string. It was quite fun tying lots of knots and then just wrapping it round and round and round. So yeah, if I was making something knobbly to a smaller scale, then this knotted string technique is a great technique. But it's only step 1 in our bulking process, because the string's just too thin. This needs to be quite fat and chunky and sausagey, you know, they're not tree branches. So actually I just end up using twisted together ropes or worms or snakes of brown packing paper, which works great. As I've said multiple times before, we're always prototyping, so there are always at least 1 or 2 steps that looking back you didn't need to do. So the knobbly string is one of them. You don't know what you're doing till you've done it, and then you do. So once I've learned how you do these things, I pass the knowledge on to you. Oh, this is fun. So this black goth glue has definitely a lower melting point than the clear stuff because it goes very runny very quickly. So this sort of evil tree dripping its leathery goodness, no, badness, and praise your new god with fire. No, this is just using a flame to get rid of the stringy cobwebs that you always get with hot glue. That's so metal. Polyfilla. While that dries, let's texture this plant pot. I keep saying pot plant. Let's texture this plant pot for real. This is some polyfilla I had left over from sorting out the skirting boards downstairs, and it's 1 hour drying stuff as well. You can paint it within an hour, so it's really good for texture. While it's sticky, you can make this very spiky, fuzzy texture, and then I'm just wetting my hand and smoothing it out again, and you just find your balance. Yeah, you find your Q zone, and that's a nice clay looking texture, and I'm just sitting it in front of my little box heater to dry a bit more quickly. So attach the eyes to the tree with various sizes of cable tie, but now they need eyelids. So all my remaining Milliput I rather precisely rolled out into one very long thin worm, and then I very precisely divided it into 20 upper and lower eyelids, because I'm organised like that. As you can see there, that eyelid just snapped. Because it dries quite quickly, when it starts out it's very elastic and you can just stretch the bits and make them longer, but I did notice that once I'd done a few eyes, when I pulled it, it started snapping, so it dries before your very hands. So maybe do it in 2 batches of 5 eyes at a time. It's 5:50 AM on a cold Sunday morning in late October. Let's stick some cotton wool to a little tree. Huckle wanted his breakfast, and I did go back to bed, but when you've got White Flag by Dido stuck in your head, you get up. Yes, you do. We're mixing a green, quite hard to mix the right shade of paint in a very large quantity. So I started with grey, because I didn't want to start with green, because I thought it'd be too saturated. So I'm mixing in, I've got old house paint tester tubes, I've got some green gouache, some green acrylic, some yellow ochre, and I've just made, again, a greeny grey. Also a bit like this wall. Secret Retreat, that's called. And now dipping sausages of cotton wool into this paint and a little bit of PVA glue mixture, because the eyes are they're on a thin neck like that, and they need to be more sausagey, so I'm kind of bulking out the necks so they're a bit more maraca shaped. Quite a good sculpting material. It takes a lot of paint, but for filling out gaps, yeah, cotton wool saturated in something that will dry, and it doesn't take days to dry, which you'd think it would, and if it's painty enough it's basically a clay, so you can really smooth and blend those edges. One thing that makes cotton wool perfect for this is, now that it's slightly dry, because it's sticky, when you dab it, it pulls out the threads, so it's a bit fuzzy. Let's get this plant pot done. Burnt umber, bit of orange, terracotta-y colour. Very happy with that. Now I've got my dried moss, shredding it up and mixing it into PVA glue to make a paste. I've got the back and the backs of the eyes mostly covered. Who knows how stuck on it is and how solid it will be. I could flip it over and start doing the front, or stand it up, and I think this might fall off. Or maybe it won't. But I'm going to dry it before I stand it up. Actually, I've just stood it up in front of my little heater and that much fell off. So, you know, have faith, it's fine. This, again, talking of stages that you maybe didn't need to do, I very precisely, with my smallest brush, painted around all these eyelid edges. But then I realised that because this moss has some long fronds in it, I went round and fully edged all the eyes with bits of moss. So again, I probably could have left that as white Milliput. The green's good in case it shows through anywhere, so no regrets. Just giving it some sort of jungle eyelashes. Very proud of this idea. I was definitely running out of moss, and I thought, I wonder what square footage of moss I've got left. So, big rectangle of PVA glue onto a silicone mat, patted all my remaining moss onto that rectangle, and left that to dry overnight. So now I've got this big dirty pancake of moss with little gaps in, sort of camouflage netting that you can tear into strips, and it's also much more time efficient for covering something. Someone forgot to get this shot in focus. Me. And now, because I'm apparently, you know, Mr. Moneybags, I stuck on the rest of the moss with super glue. So I think I probably used up a whole bottle, but it's just quicker. I don't trust PVA glue. It's an ongoing theme. I don't trust it. Now, as a filling powder, because I did, even once I'd used all my moss, there were gaps where you could see the plastic. This is made from kitchen leafage. Dried methy leaves, the contents of a couple of peppermint tea bags, some Italian mixed herbs, a bay leaf, that was the wrong colour, so I fished all those bits out again, green tea. It smells great, like a sort of minty, coriander-y curry. That's the methy. It's a bit methy, but you just wash your hands. So you put glue on all your little gaps and then sprinkle on this fragrant foliage powder. This is 3D crystal lacquer, which is designed for making like cabochon jewellery, and it's very clear. It can dry quite thick, very shiny, and it dries quickly. And it's water-based, so I wasn't scared about it melting the permanent marker that I'd used on the eyes. I think I glossed these eyes, that's far too much, but I take some off and put it on one of the other eyes. Yeah, I think I glossed and re-glossed these eyes about 3 times just because putting a really shiny layer onto something is very enjoyable. Brings the eyes to life. They look permanently wet and follow you around the room. So last night I coated this all in this watery PVA mix, into which I scraped a load of orange and brown and yellow chalk pastels because I'm trying to warm it up a bit. I've come to accept that it's not quite the same species or genus of lichen as you see in the movie. It's a slightly drier, deader looking. It's not as fluffy. I think it's not a prop. Is it a character? Puppet. I think the puppet in the movie is made with sea sponge, the sort of shaggy sponge. So I had a go with shredding up some sponge I had, which turned out to be a waste of a sponge. But I've come to love how it looks and what it is. But the one in the movie has lots of russet and red. It's not particularly green. So I'm just now going for even more russety brown. So I've mixed up some orange, mustard, yellow ochre colour and a bit more red to try and make a nice rust. Let's put it on the back of all the eyeballs, and then I've got some bright orange as well. It's just a choice of how much do you blend it in, or do you hold your nerve and have the guts to just leave dots and spots. Yeah, I'm happy with this. This is looking more interesting. Adding to the dustiness of this plant pot, just a terracotta coloured chalk pastel and brushing that all over so it just has a slightly less shiny look, and then hot glue it all together. I did burn myself, but I did it off camera. And finally, unless I do something today with this orange moss, let's say, and finally, I'm just putting PVA glue all around the edges of the pot and up onto the inner sides of the pot as well, and pouring in the remainder of my foliage mix. Sprinkling just all that in, leave it to set, and then I just poured the loose stuff out. And it's done, I think. And there you have it, Labyrinth eye lichen that lights up. It's not really a lamp, you know, you wouldn't want to read by it or anything, but it lights up, and that's pretty cool. Today's YouTube channel recommendation is Dr. Toys. He modifies action figures and makes little robots out of junk and stuff. Mainly I just love his vibe. He seems like an incredibly nice man, and I recommend his channel. If you saw my Ghostbusters Neutrona 1 video, you will know that the quasi-Belgian action hero Lunge Dolphin did an album of famous film songs. He also did one from a very labyrinth-esque movie called Crazy Maze, called Goblin Prance, which may sound a little bit like Magic Dance by David Bowie. That's on Bandcamp. Also, if you're looking for a spooky good time, The Wilds, my werewolf-based short film, might be a nice thing to watch in the run-up to Halloween. If you observe Halloween, do have a spooktacular one. Got to get that out of your system. It's the only month of the year you're allowed to use that word. Doctor Who stuff next month. I made big promises, a lot of big talk on my Patreon about doing a Doctor Who themed Halloween special, but my week was looking a bit busy, so I juggled things around, but we're going to have a Doctor Who birthday month. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this, please, it's the one that's the most work, but please share it with someone. You could tweet about me, you could Insta me, you could Facebook me if anyone's still on there. I feel like it's just me and some advertising. But yeah, if you do Patreon, which you should, please follow me on Patreon. And if you've never followed anyone on Patreon, please follow me on Patreon. I'd love to get 1 or 2 new patrons for every video, but you know, I've been away for a long time because I've been making lots of Red Dwarf picture frames and Christmas ornaments. So there's going to be a couple of mini-sodes along fairly soon of how I made those. If you don't like people who say then you're not going to follow me on Patreon. I'm working on it, I'm trying. Thank you so much, as always, to my ever wild and wonderful and loyal and lovely patrons. Love you guys. Just going to think on camera if I've got anything more to say. Compelling viewing. Thanks very much for watching. Lots of love, and I'll see you soon.
France, Scotland, France, Scotland, France, Scotland, France, Scotland, France. Can't walk yet, but girl, you sure can dance. Sure can. Dance, Scotland, dance, Scotland, dance, dance, Scotland, dance, Scotland, dance. Kidnap children, make them cry. Those babies traumatized.